Hey guys, Ron here, and it's no secret that I have a fondness for starters. They were made to be relatively strong and super appealing. Most of them are exceptionally cute in their basic stage and become powerful partners once they are fully evolved. They evoke a sense of friendship and we become attached to them almost immediately. So what if we could extend this feeling to other Pokemon that exist? What if Pokemon that are in the middle and end of the decks were one of the 3 Pokemon you have the option to choose as your partner? A year ago when I released my video on the Pokemon that can replace Pikachu as the mascot, I started making this video by compiling a list of Pokemon that have a base stat total between 545 and 515, so they're already strong enough to replace your starter, and also useful if you want a Pokemon as powerful as your starter to put on your team. And I ranked these Pokemon to see which could go beyond that. Which of these Pokemon could be complete replacements if the franchise ever wanted to promote Pokemon that are on the level of the partner Pokemon we already know and love. Arcanine, Florges, and Volcarona with a base stat total of 550 and higher are a little bit more powerful than the average starter Pokemon, so they aren't in the running. But I gotta say that Arcanine could have been in the top 3 if I didn't set a minimum and maximum power level for these candidates. You can check out Emperor Cubone's video on this subject if you prefer different criteria. So since we're going in order of base stat total, let's naturally begin with Togekiss, our first and statistically strongest Pokemon on the list, with a 545 base stat total. Perhaps it's too strong, but I'm not going to take points off or anything for that. I mean, look at that face. How can I say no to that? Unfortunately, it may be too cute to be a final evolution of a starter, but that's just personal preference. I'm sure in the eyes of Como-Oh, this thing is terrifying. Some people even hate that their cute starters turn into fierce warriors, so this may be a nice gift for them. It does get 2 full extra points for being part of a 3-stage family. You see, the ranking goes like this. I can give a total of 10 points, 7 of which will go for Appeal, an extra 1 or 2 points if the Pokemon has 1 or 2 other evolutions, and another bonus point for having a starting type, like Water or something similar like Ice. And yes, I know Eevee's technically a starter nowadays, but we're only counting traditional starters. Togepi is already a fan favorite, so it helps boost up Togekiss's appeal, but it has no types that are even close to the traditional elemental types of starter Pokemon. In the end, Togekiss gets a strong 8. That's definitely a contender. Gyarados is also super strong, but this video isn't just about battling, since all of these Pokemon are strong, and the huge problem with Gyarados is that it's huge, it's scary, and most importantly, it's not even close to friendly or intelligent looking. A lot of starter Pokemon need to look like they'd understand anything you'd say, and maybe even hang out with you on your off time, but not Gyarados. It has a pre-evolved form, but it can't really do anything, so it doesn't help really. In this case, it's a water type, which gives it an extra point, so overall, 5 points is the most I can give this beast. Snorlax, while it is slightly more appealing than Gyarados, its typing and lack of a full family only gives it 1 extra point. It's cuddly and powerful, but it's actually rather plain for a starter Pokemon, although it is a super popular and great Pokemon overall. It gets 6 points. Kingdra. Right off the bat, in terms of typing and family, this Pokemon gets full points. Not to mention, it has a very genuine evolution from cute to cool and honestly feels like a starter Pokemon aside from the whole Dragon Scale evolution part. I'd give it full points if it wasn't for the fact that it can't emote as well as other Pokemon, since it can't really smile or make any other oral expression. It gets an 8, only because of the 2 flaws I mentioned. Blissey, very similar to Togekiss and Snorlax when you think about it. Unfortunately, it has very polarized stats, making it not as useful as a lot of starter Pokemon are. This Pokemon gets a 7. While we are gonna consider baby Pokemon like Happiny as normal 1-stage Pokemon, I do believe that since Blissey looks similar to Chansey, that its evolution wouldn't be too satisfying to some fans. Milotic is very beautiful and super appealing, but I wouldn't say that it would be well received as a starter Pokemon, especially considering how ugly Feebas is and the relatively unique ways this Pokemon evolves. It just seems more of a hassle than Magikarp. Evolution method won't usually contribute to point loss unless it's coupled with other things that reduce this Pokemon's appeal as a starter, and I've talked to people who actually don't perceive Milotic as beautiful. So if you don't think this thing is pretty, you probably hate it, since beauty is the entire point of this Pokemon, and we all know beauty is subjective. 7 points. Electivire. Electric types will be receiving the point for type compatibility since, like Ice, it's completely elemental, unlike normal or fighting. So Electivire gets at least 3 points right off the bat, but a big problem here is how this Pokemon is a bit controversial. Some are in the camp that it's an example of an ugly Gen 4 evolution of a previous Gen Pokemon like Tangrowth and Licky. Others think it's an example of a badass evolution like Gliscor, Weavile, Dusknoir, and much more. So it's not completely popular, and it's admittedly intimidating, which I like, but can understand if some are frightened by this beast. It still gets a respectable 7 points, considering it checks off a lot of starter necessities. But everything I said about Electivire can easily be said about the Magby family. However, the butt face on Magmar does detract a point, and to some, Magmortar is creepier than Electivire. This line gets 7 points. Haxorus, though, is a prime candidate. Axew is cute and relatively popular and evolves to a cool middle stage that would honestly rival a good chunk of the starter evolution middle stages. And Haxorus tops this family off by being strong and awesome. Although it's super underrated in my opinion, I know the incredibly late evolution levels of these Pokemon are a huge turnoff, and Haxorus is admittedly too monstrous for some. Charizard is cuddlier than this creature, so it goes from a 9 to an 8. Lapras. Now we're finally talking about Pokemon that have a base stat total that is equal to an existing starter Pokemon final evolution. Lapras has the same base stat total as Swampert, and while it has no family whatsoever, it's one of the least disliked Pokemon in existence. It's super friendly, powerful, and well designed. It's generally loved, so it gets an 8. Crobat is gonna be hard to convince a lot of people to choose. Crobat itself is actually popular and useful in battle, but it's almost impossible to convince fans that Zubat is irresistibly cute or desirable, and Golbat doesn't help either, so they only get 6 points. Would have been 7 if Crobat could show any signs of emotion. Magnezone. Now, object Pokemon aren't the most popular. Who am I kidding? They're usually the least popular. But the Magnemite line is far from unpopular, but it's certainly not the most appealing. I've never heard a kid gush about how they love the Magnet area Pokemon Magnezone, but it is fun to use. Because of its elemental typing and complete evolutionary line, Magnezone gets enough points to total 6. Not bad. Rhyperior is very tough to rank because it's generally disliked and Rhydon is way more popular, along with the fact that Rhyhorn is too brawny and not cute enough to be a starter Pokemon. But I don't know if I'm going to give a rock and ground types a typing point, because yes, these types represent the element of earth, and I'm allowing elemental types like electric and ice to receive an extra point for having elemental powers. But then would flying type represent the element of air or wind? The ultimate answer was only to allow elemental types that would have been classified as special prior to Generation 4 to receive an extra point. So those are water, grass, fire, ice, and electric. Basically Pokemon that create, store, and shoot an element, not ones that generally control a surrounding element, like most ground, rock, or flying types. So Rhyperior doesn't get an extra point for type, and receives a 5. Tangrowth is here because it's a grass type and isn't weak, but other than that, this Pokemon gets a 4. Porygon Z is actually heavily used and not generally disliked. However, there's no way Nintendo would allow Game Freak to make Porygon have any kind of prominence in the franchise, and honestly, Porygon Z and even Porygon 2 can barely emote. I don't know what this guy is thinking, so its only use is in battle. It gets a 5. Vanillux. Now honestly, considering it gets all the possible extra points and Vanillite is pretty cute in my opinion, this trio isn't one of the lowest on the list. It gets a 5, and that's not too bad all things considered. But don't let that stop you from using these Pokemon if you actually like their design and stupid faces. Noivern doesn't rise high because it's family and type, but this Pokemon is appealing. People enjoy its presence, so it gets a solid 7. It does have a weird concept for a starter, in a good way though. Weird isn't a negative or positive thing for me. Gogoat is unexpectedly strong. Honestly, if there was one more evolution in this line, it could be an ideal starter Pokemon. Skidoo, yes, it's pronounced Skidoo apparently, as the former head of the dub was explicitly instructed by the Pokemon company itself. Well, Skidoo is fun and adorable. It honestly looks like a starter Pokemon already. It's uncanny. I give this Pokemon a 9. It could have gotten a 10 and 1 if there was a middle evolution between these two goats. Exeggutor is here, but for power alone. This thing is too much of a meme to be a starter, but then again, that hasn't stopped Rowlet. The problem is that the whole concept and design is too odd for Western audiences. You can't really have a multiple egg seeds as a starter. There are more than one of them, and they're constantly used as a negative example of Gen 1 designs, so this family gets a 4. Aggron is pretty high up there. It gets an 8, and here's why. It's very popular, and the family has a very good progression from cute to cool to badass, but it's a little too fierce. This is not a Pokemon any mother would allow their child to have in their arsenal. So as much as any kid would want this thing on their side, the Pokemon League would not allow this beast to be an official starter Pokemon. And I know Charizard is as dangerous looking, but Gen 1 gets a pass. Almost all of the Pokemon in that generation would kill you in the wild. Why am I even trying to justify this? 8 is very high. Walrein though. It's a Walrein! I think Walrein's on top, guys. It's a water type with a 3-stage line. Spheal is also super cute and worthy of being anybody's partner. It's basically a Rowlet and Popplio mixed together, and Sealeo already reminds me of a top-tier starter middle stage. The whole line is, in my opinion, as appealing as the Primarina line. I want to give this Pokemon a 10, but I don't think people like it as much as I do. So I asked my followers on Twitter, and its lack of hatred convinced me. we have our first 10. Mamoswine is also a top contender since it gets all the extra points possible. The problem is that Swinub and Piloswine aren't special looking. I like them, but at first glance they're just balls of hair, so why would kids choose them over the friendly turtle, cute chick, or bright owl? So while these Pokemon nail all the criteria, they're just too brown. I mean, I'm not actually taking points off for brownness, but it's part of the problem. Don't take that out of context. Mamoswine could totally be the final form of a starter Pokemon, so in the end, they get a nice 7. Evolutions, while they are as powerful as a bunch of starters, are disqualified since Eevee is technically a starter, so let's not even look at them, just forget them. Lucario is one of the most popular Pokemon ever, and I have no doubt that this family is as appealing as a bunch of starters. These two are even candidates to replace Pikachu as a mascot. In the end, they get an 8, which is the maximum amount of points they can get without another evolution or appropriate elemental type. Hippowdon's here with a magnificent presence, and Hippopotas is fine. It's not the cutest Pokemon, but it's not outright ugly. Ultimately, they get a 6 though. Probopass is here just because it got power, but we all know that this line isn't even close to popular enough, so they get a 4. Dusknoir is actually a strong contender for a non-elemental Pokemon. The line is definitely beloved as ghosts, but when we put the context of starter Pokemon, this family may not hold up. I mean, they do their jobs as scary Pokemon, but partner Pokemon aren't supposed to be scary, so they get a 6. Now, Luxray. We are finally able to talk about the family that I think has the highest chance out of any non-water, grass, or fire type. Shinx is easily one of the most marketable Pokemon, and could have the same stage presence as a mascot. Luxio is a fantastic transition, and like a lot of the perfect families, it already feels like a starter middle stage. And then we have Luxray. If there were a 4th starter option in Sinnoh, I'm sure Luxray would have been it. It's cool yet cuddly, fierce yet friendly, powerful yet reserved. It's a perfect balance of dark and light, yin and yang. The Luxray family gets a 10. Tyrantrum and Aurorus are exceptionally strong for a regional fossil duo. Of course, Archeops takes the cake, but it's too strong to be a starter. However, these two have a great balance. They're very appealing, but both families get a 6. Starmie has a base stat total of 520, it's just 5 points under the weakest of the starter Pokemon. But it's still powerful, however it has no face, 4 points. Flygon really is up there, and honestly, although I think Trapinch is cute, it's unconventionally cute, enough for me to understand if you don't find it appealing. Flygon though is super popular and can emote just fine. They get a strong 8. Rotom is here, and we've already traveled with this Pokemon enough for it to already feel like a partner. It gets a 7 considering it has no evolutions and is too gimmicky in a good way to be a trainer's first Pokemon. Klinkling is here, but only because it has the power and the family. It gets a 3. I don't have to explain why a bunch of young trainers wouldn't want 2 Gears as their first Pokemon. Chandelure and Aegislash are actually the highest contenders among the object Pokemon. They're generally loved, so while Chandelure is more appealing, Aegislash is better at battle. But since Chandelure has the extra type point, it gets an 8, while Aegislash gets a 7. It just doesn't have a face, and a sword isn't a partner Pokemon, it's a weapon. Crocodile's actually very underrated here. I believe Sandile is incredibly cute and has the aura of a starter. Everybody likes Krokorok, and you can't deny how cool Crocodile looks. This family gets a nice 8. Gardevoir and Gallade are actually the hardest to pin down, cause out of all the non-elemental types, this family is pretty solid. But is the branched evolution a problem or not? People complain when their Primarina is male and when their Incineroar happens to be female, so in this family, you have a bit more control if your Kirlia happens to be male. That being said, they're popular and strong. They get an 8 though for being too humanoid for a starter Pokemon. Delmise is here, but this is clearly not starter material. It gets a 4, cause luckily it's a grass type. But now the following Pokemon all have a base stat total of 515, and I've deemed that as 1 point too low. Plus there's a bunch of them, and that would extend the video by another 5 minutes, so let's just show you the points. Tentacruel gets a 6, Aerodactyl gets a 5, Licky Licky gets a 3, Yanmega gets a 6, Gigalith gets a 7, Electros gets a 7 as well, and Cryogonal gets a 3, tying with Licky Licky for the lowest on the list. But the last Pokemon is actually a contender. Roserade is a grass type with a family of 3. In the past, I'd say it's too feminine, but now Primarina and Delphox exist. Budew is indisputably cute, Roselia is pretty, and Roserade is beautiful, powerful, and fairly popular. It gets a strong 9. So who are the winners? Since we have 3 starters in each gen, how about awarding the winner to 3 spots? Well, the only 2 families to get a full 10 are the Walrein and Luxray lines. Pokemon that would be perfect starters. Now the only problem we have is that 2 evolution lines get 9 points. Gogoat and Roserade. However, Roserade got access to all 10 points, yet got a 9 because it's a rose and all starters tend to be based on an animal. So while it has the criteria for a grass-type partner, its concept simply isn't one that matches that of a starter Pokemon. However, Gogoat received all the points that it could possibly get, and it's not their fault that there isn't a middle stage in this family. If there was, this Pokemon would fit right in with any starter trio. So Gogoat is our third slot, but only by a bit. The real winner is Walrein, with Luxray coming in second and Gogoat third. In the end, this was all for fun, so if your results are different, it's all good. As long as you enjoyed this video, and if you did, leave a like to show your support. Make sure to subscribe and follow me on Twitter. Also, check the description for the music I used, the shirts I made for you guys, my Patreon, and the join button below where you can donate to get cool rewards like seeing videos days early and more. I'll see you guys very soon.